We are the product of the way we've been taught to think. And for 150 years, from the time that Charles Darwin published his landmark book, Origin of Species, 1859, a little over 150 years, we have been taught to think in terms of separation and competition. We have been taught a story, a scientific story, that says we're the product of an accident in biology, random mutations, and that from those mutations, competition was the factor that allowed us to be successful, we as modern humans, to be successful in the world. That thinking was shared by Darwin in 1859. It was based on the science that was known at the time, and that science was embraced readily in the mainstream. And I say this to audiences all over the world and young people. When you say 1859 to a young person, it's like, that's just so long ago. And they say to me over and over again, Greg, we get that maybe Darwin wasn't quite right. So what? What difference could it possibly make in this modern high-tech world that we have today that's so different from 1859? It's a really good question. And I say to them, what you're saying is correct. This is a modern high-tech world. However, the foundations of the society that we live in today were put into place late 1800s, early 1900s, precisely at the time that Darwin came out with these theories and precisely at the time that society embraced these theories. So the idea of survival of the strongest, and these are Darwin's actual words. I've researched his manuscripts. Later, they were adapted to survival of the fittest. His words in the book, Survival of the Strongest, that was his thinking. And that idea is the foundation for the economic system that's driving the world's economies right now. It is the foundation for the corporate system. It's the foundation for the way that we have been taught to live our lives on a personal level. And I think most of us in the Western world, if we can think back to our school years, at some point we were taught that this is a dog-eat-dog world. It's a very common term in Western language, that we've got to fight tooth and nail for everything that comes to us, or the world will roll right over us if we don't do that. And that thinking plays out in everything from the workplace to the classroom, plays out in our most intimate relationships, even on the subconscious level. And I've been with teachers and authors and scholars who have written magnificent works on cooperation and the healed soul on one hand, and on the other hand, when you see what happens to them in those moments that nobody else is looking, and it's they and their most intimate partners that they share their lives with, because that's where the buttons get pushed, they will revert to that most primal instinct of lashing out in a hurtful way when they feel attacked, because that's the conditioning. So these ideas that are with us, they are deeply ingrained into our culture, into our society, into our education system, into our subconscious through the way that we have been taught, certainly through our families, our friends, education, science, our community, our religion, all of these things. So we're seeing these ideas play out on a global level. One of the reasons I find this so interesting, we are what are called self-referencing beings. And what that means is that we tend to hinge our personal sense of well-being upon what's happening in the world around us. And we all know that. We come home from work, if we are still watching any news on television, a lot of people are not, but if we are, and you turn on that news and you hear, the world stock markets are tanking and a recession is looming, and if you hear, there's a war brewing in the Middle East and that your companies, may go under, you can be having a perfect day, and when you hear those things, you begin to feel less perfect about your day and your world. This is because we are self-referencing beings, so we tend to hang the way we feel on external circumstances. And what I'm seeing happening is that the better we know ourselves, the less we fear change in the world, the less we fear other people, the less we fear ourselves and our own power. And this is important anytime. It's especially critical right now, because we are living this rare and precious moment when we are globalizing a planet of just under 8 billion people. So we are pushing together cultures and religions and the ways that men think about women and women think about men and the way that we've been taught to live. We're pushing ourselves together and asking us to assimilate and unify based on the thinking of separation and competition. And that discrepancy, I think, is showing up on a global level when it comes to what we see happening in the world. And this is where it's dangerous, especially dangerous, because there is a factor, there's a media factor and a manipulation of mass thinking through the media. And those individuals who have not yet discovered who they are in here are susceptible to what it is that media is saying to them for the very reasons that we're talking about right now. If you don't know who you are, and your sense of well-being hinges upon what you hear about your world, not your experience, but what you hear from people that you've been taught to respect, the news media, for example, or a medical doctor, or a scientist. If your sense of well-being hinges upon what they are telling you about your world, regardless of what you're experiencing, if they're telling you bad things, you're going to begin to feel bad. And if they are telling you to judge other people, and this is rampant, not just in America, not just in the UK, not just in Europe, it is a global phenomenon. We're being taught to fear one another because we are different as we globalize and attempt to unify. We're being taught Christians fear Muslims, blacks and whites fear one another, straight and gay fear one another, not because of what they've learned in their lives, because of what they're being told about one another. So to the degree that we can embrace the new discoveries that overturn 150 years of science based upon separation and competition, to the degree that we embrace that in our lives, we transcend the need to feel good about ourselves based upon what's happening in the world. We create the environment within us. We are no longer a victim of our circumstances unless we choose to be. Because we all come from a world of polarization, and we all come from a world, we all have hurt, we all have injustices. We can choose to be defined by our past. And we've seen generations in the past that do that, and I have friends and family members who have chosen to do that. They suffer. They're not happy people. Their lives become very miserable. Or we can choose to draw the line and say, yes, I've been hurt in the past. Yes, I've been wronged in the past. And from this moment forward, I'm going to embrace that and become who I choose to become rather than be defined by the circumstances of my past. So on a global level, you're seeing this play out. The media can only have the influence when we allow that influence into our lives. There's an American author, his name is Scott Turow, and he sums this up so beautifully in non-scientific language. He says, "Who are we but the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves and believe?" So it's not just what we tell ourselves. It's not just what our culture and our school and our friends and our family and our society tell us. What do we actually believe? Who are we but the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves and believe? We all have a story.